Kia ora, welcome to Mana Talanoa. I'm Andre Whitaker, and welcome to our Wahine Toa Women in Sport segment. And it's my pleasure to welcome Sarah Cowley, who's a national track and field representative, also went to the Commonwealth Games and the Olympic Games. So, talofa lava, Sarah, welcome.
Talofa lava, Andre. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, well, wonderful to have you join us, and it'd be really interesting to talk to you about your journey, actually from the Oceania Games as a junior, Commonwealth and Olympic Games. But let's start with your family and your heritage. Understand that you're of Samoan heritage also.
Yes, yeah. So my dad, my late father, he arrived in New Zealand when he was 7 years old from Samoa, from the villages of Vaianga and Vaiusu. And my dad was one of 10, so I have a big Pacific family who I love dearly and very proud of my Samoan heritage. Like some of your guests, I guess in the past, I didn't have the richness of the language. I don't have the, I can't kōrero in Samoan. I speak a lot more French than Samoan, so it's something which I guess in the past I've had some shame attached to that, but actually it is what it is. I'm a proud New Zealand born Samoan, and learning the language is something I want to do. So we have actually in our toilet at the moment, like kids, I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So we've got like ABC type charts around in English, but also ABC charts around in Samoan as well. So it's a cool journey to be part on as well. But on my mum's side, she is New Zealand European, I guess, and my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, came to New Zealand when he was 7 from Sunderland in the UK. So equally proud of my English European side and the blending of two cultures into one.
Yeah, well, it's the face of the future of New Zealand. As you said, blended cultures, mixed cultures. And in terms of the journey that you've described and understanding your culture, language, everyone's at a different stage. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that there are some people sit at one end of the scale being totally immersed to the other end where they're just catching up. It's something they want to learn, and I think that's perfectly fine. And it's great that people are acknowledging it, and love that you're having these little prompts around the house that are helping you and the children do that. So whereabouts did you grow up? Where did the family come from?
Yeah, so I actually, when my dad came to New Zealand, they came to Rotorua. So I still have lots of family in Rotorua, and my mum was from Auckland, but I grew up in Rotorua. So I love the Rotorua community. My mum still lives there. And we had a really great childhood growing up in Rotorua. I'm in the middle of 2 boys. So now though, I'm coming to you today from my dining room in Cambridge, outside of Cambridge, in a community called Te Miro. And because my husband works in elite sport in New Zealand, that's why we live here. But we love living here in a country sort of lifestyle, and we've got a planting project where we're reforesting some of our land into native trees. So it's worked out well for us.
Oh, very nice.
That was my phone. I'll just turn it off. I thought I turned it off.
That's fine. Look, a very beautiful part of the country, Cambridge, and particularly around Lake Karapiru. I have spent a bit of time up there paddling on that lake, and I guess that's Sarah Ulmer's hometown, so maybe you see her cycling around there as well. So in terms of sport then, and growing up in Rotorua, track and field athletics is where you've built a strong career. Was that where you started? Was athletics your introduction to sport? And how did that come about?
Yeah, well, I guess it was like what I would say is a typical sporty Kiwi kid. We grew up with grass and we had a backyard, and because I was in the middle of 2 boys, we were always just outside. I think my parents were trying to burn off our energy, but we were into anything, and I was always trying to like keep up with my brothers. And so that was actually like very annoying at the time, but actually in retrospect, amazing, like incredible. And, you know, my brothers are some of my best friends. And so that sport, I think, was just a natural part of our family. And my mum and dad, they met through basketball. I come from a basketball family. My dad played basketball for New Zealand. But we did lots of different sports, but I think typically I did, to answer your question, is I really liked doing athletics in the summertime, and I played a lot of netball in the wintertime. I wanted to really be a silver fern growing up, because actually that's what I saw on television. I hardly ever saw athletics. And so it was only when I went to primary school and there was a girl, her name was Hayley Heathcote, and she was a friend of mine, and she was really into athletics, that she invited me to go along with her, and that's how it kind of started. And I think my parents, because my brothers both played cricket in the summer, they were going to like 2 separate venues, and they were like, sure, you can go for the day. It was like, you know, it's probably quite helpful for them. So that's really how my love started with athletics, and then sort of grew, and just through the sheer good luck of having teachers into athletics and other people and other influences, with this foundation of sport through, you know, my immediate family and my extended family, where sport was valued and it was supported that we played sport, that I was actually incredibly lucky to have found a pathway through sport.
And so that pathway in sport, or particularly through athletics then, so was that through the school or a particular club? So what were kind of that pathway? Was it from the school and then the club, and then you started, I guess, figuring out that you were pretty good at it?
Yeah, so I competed for Lake City Athletics Club, and actually I'm still a member of their club, because I just came back last season and did one more season with them. But really it was through the influence of my first coach, who was a teacher, my first formal coach, who was a teacher at my high school, whose name was Morag Owen. And she was a wonderful lady who went to the Commonwealth Games. And she was a PE teacher at our school. And, you know, I went as a third former along to the school sports, and I was good, I would say, but I wasn't like exceptional. And like in that first year I was made the semi-finals of the New Zealand secondary school hurdles, and that was like a really big deal. And then the following year I was like, right, okay, I got third, and well, I got third in high jump, and then I won the hurdles, and then it just every year just kept getting better with more effort. As you get better, you get obviously want to do it more in my situation. So I think it was a mixture of great high school sort of coaching environment, and equally I could have played netball and had that one person go through, but instead I had another person. So I think it is a bit of luck involved.
And interesting, the pathway that you chose, like netball, you know, as a team sport, and you're around a lot of people, and you know, the hurdles, high jump, and you know, heptathlon, which we'll talk about, are the sports that you got into. Yeah, you know, it'd be good to talk about the kind of training that you did to become good at an athlete, to be a good high jumper, to be a good hurdler. It's not like you're running around with a netball team or a rugby team where there's, you know, at least a dozen other people. There must be a lot of moments where that's actually different. Yeah. What's the training regime like?
It's hugely different. I've spent a lot of time by myself training, a lot of time just with my coach training together, but I've also had some really great training partners across different events. And I guess athletics in New Zealand is a small community, so I'd like to say that we're supportive of other people. And if you're at the track and someone's doing a rep, you're seeing them, you know, on their last rep dying, that you want to cheer them on, because you know you're about to do the same thing. So it is very different to netball. And when I briefly went back to netball after the London Olympics, being in that team environment, I mean, I love training with other people.
Mm.
And so that's surreal. But I also really like the solitude of having time to think when you're by yourself. And
Yep.
now as a mum with 2 little kids, I don't really get that solitude time very often. And I often reflect on, you know, some of my greatest thoughts I had, well, you know, not greatest thoughts, but just the thinking time when I was warming up, because I'd warm up for, you know, 40 minutes for a 2 or 3 hour training session. And it was, to go back to your point, is what is the training like? Well, it's in heptathlon, it's very varied, lots of technical work because a lot of the events are technical, but you also need a really strong foundation of speed and power. And so you train a lot. You're generally the first person at the track and the last one to leave.
So that's the track work. So there must be a lot of non-track work that you're doing. Tell us a bit about that. What's the other kinds of training that you're using to complement actually doing the skill, the technique on the track? What happens away from the track?
Yeah, so you need to be really strong, I guess, and resilient in your own body to be able to cope with the demands of the track and the forces that you apply. Like, for example, high jump is just ridiculous forces because you get asking your body to run round the curve, plant your foot at quite an awkward angle, and then jump over a bar well over your head. So I did a lot of strength and conditioning work, I guess, in the gym, lifted a lot of weights in my time. I enjoy that type of training. I think naturally as a Pacific Islander, that's what we're kind of suited to. And I did lots of plyometric training. So conditioning to be able to handle the load, to be able to handle more training. But aside from that, I guess aside from the track work, I invested a lot in towards the later part of my career, and a lot of sport psych work, so mental skills training to be able to tap into another level, I guess.
Well, that's very interesting. I was the mental skills training side of the sport, because you did talk about that earlier, saying in that warm-up 40-minute period, there was a lot of thinking going on. So I guess it's relatively new for some people, the mental aspect of a sport. So for you, what were some of the mental drills, if you like, or was there a routine that you did that was all about getting you in the mental space?
Yeah, so I guess there was lots of different elements to the mental skills work that I did, and I had a really amazing sports psych called Dave Galbraith, who's well known in New Zealand for some of the work that he does. And he's a friend of mine, and we still meet, you know, all these years after I retired, because I like being around people with have great energy, and he's actually got a really great podcast at the moment. I think it's called Talking Performance. But in terms of some of the skills, definitely for every event, I had very basic cues, and I would repeat them. Lots of visualization work. I mean, particularly with like high jump, what you're asking your body to do, you need to believe that you can do it. Similarly with long jump, for me, I had a few issues with actually getting on the board, a few red flags in my time and critical moments in my career, which were hugely devastating. So being able to visualize and do positive affirmations around that. But more than that, I think it's actually about a self-acceptance, getting to the root of who you are as a person that can allow you to be a better athlete. So I think often we think so much about the performance. Actually, we need to take quite a number of layers back and strip it down as to, okay, well, what do we actually see at a subconscious level telling ourselves that could be limiting our potential? And that's just not in sport, it's in everyday life.
I was going to add to that. That must be very helpful away from that, whether it's in professional career, and I guess certainly being a parent, and being able to be not only physically but mentally up for what needs to be done. So look, you had over 15 years in the sport, and you just talked about the training, the athleticism, physical build up, the mental. And, you know, that obviously all stood you in very good stead to go to the Commonwealth Games and the Olympic Games. So let's look at that journey there where you've come out of the local national scene, and then perhaps to like, let's follow what was the first kind of big international event, whether it was the Commonwealth Olympic Games or Oceania that you went to. Like, let's talk through some of those big international events that you went to.
Yeah, sure. So I was 21 when I qualified for Commonwealth Games, and actually I'd only just really transferred to heptathlon 5 months before that, after I competed at World University Games in my first year of my physio degree. And I came back and I actually had roomed with a heptathlete, and I'd done a couple of heptathlons when I was a junior, really, 2 or 3, but I was like, right, I need to be, if I'm going to really accomplish what I really want to accomplish in athletics, my best chance is in heptathlon. So, which is unfortunate because it's a heap of a lot of work, but actually it's the greatest challenge, I think, in terms of really finding out where your athleticism lies. And so I made the Commonwealth Games, competed in Melbourne in 2006. But then actually my journey to the Olympics from that was actually really tough, I had 5 years from 2007, say, to 2012, where I improved only 2%. And that's like less than inflation. It's just so bad for the effort that I was putting in. And 7 times when I look back at my career around the world, like, did I go to a heptathlon and I did a no jump or a no throw, or I fell in the last hurdle and I got 0 points. So I got 0 points in an event. And that's basically like, you can't get 0 points in an event. And so I had to, I became incredibly resilient around that. But for a long time, it was very hard because I was just doing the same thing, expecting the same results. So my journey to the Olympics is more meaningful to me than the Olympics itself, because of the roller coaster nature of it. And I think when people say, you know, like, oh, you know, you've gone to the Olympics, well, that's great, but actually, particularly in 2011 to 2012 for me was really a real period of huge growth, but with that is huge discomfort. So that's where the growth lies.
Well, a couple of things there. You mentioned the sort of 2% less than inflation growth, and hitting can't hit 0. So what were the things that you had to do to change so that you were turning that around, so that when you got to the London Olympics, you're feeling more confident about where you're at? Were there any? What were some of those things? I
guess I was a real creature of my own self-sabotage when I look back on it. And that for an athlete is really hard to admit, because we're taught to be strong, to believe in ourselves, and, you know, and then to say, actually, but, you know, I'm fine in training. And then when I get to competition, like, what is the handbrake on me? And for me, it was, I had to go away and figure out those subconscious limitations was some of the main things. But I also, you know, worked a lot on strength and conditioning. I got some better people on my team, and, well, not just better, awesome people on my team, and changed some other stuff in my life. And it's amazing what can happen, you know, when you really, when you get the right people on the bus, when you're in a good space, when you really commit to every training session rather than just, and it's not like I wasn't committed. It's not like I wasn't, you know, in the game, but I all of a sudden became in the game. And it was really fulfilling.
Well, you mentioned having the right people around you and the right support, and your coach, which came on board in 2009, Elena Brown, look, sounds like she's got a fabulous background in the sport. And maybe talk about Elena and the influence that she had on you being your coach.
Yeah, so Elena, she was formerly Vinogradova. She's Russian, but we've adopted her in New Zealand, and she's quite happily adopted us, which is great. So she's an athletics coach at my former club, Bays Athletics, and I've been well looked after by Bays, and they've been a great club and a great servant of New Zealand athletics. And Elena, for me, came about in just a really critical time in my athletics career, and I guess in my life. And she was tough, really tough. I mean, like, she told you if there was no, like, there's no mucking around, there's no sort of well-being at that time approach. It's just like, right, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to weigh. This is what you need to have as your skin folds, and there's no excuses. And she had really high standards and high expectations. But for me, as someone who liked that approach, it was hard work, and I literally couldn't get out of bed on Sunday mornings because I was so tired from the week. But then we'd do it all again, and we traveled a lot together by ourselves, and she was just someone who I trusted a lot, and I trusted her with my dreams, I guess. And she really came through for me. And I think the biggest thing that she did was allow other people to join our team as well. And I mentioned Dave Galbraith, but my now husband was part of that as well. So they worked really well together.
Fantastic. And so obviously Elena was with you at the London Olympics. So let's talk about that. What for you were some of the standout moments of being at the Olympics, whether it's on the track and field or just the environment? What are some of your reflections on being there, having been there?
I guess for me, I've got 3 really strong memories of London. And the first one is actually when we were welcomed into the village, and we had our team holding camp in Cardiff. And I'd been away from New Zealand for quite a number of months. We were based in Switzerland that year. And I remember coming in, and it's a really, really incredible moment. Anyone who's part of the New Zealand Olympic team knows this, and they'll haka you in. And I just remember thinking, oh, this is so weird. I've got like hay fever. I've got this like such a watery eye. And must have just been crying because that moment just meant so much to me because of my journey, because I guess we lost my dad when I was 19. So that was also something which I would have loved for him to be part of. Excuse me. And the second memory I have is actually the first event in the heptathlon is hurdles. And so you come out on the track, and I remember coming out on the track, and generally we were the first day, and generally the morning session is not that full. Just gonna have a drink of water.
I'll join you.
Hell, I've got kids. And I remember coming out, and it was like a full stadium, like 80,000 people. And because Jessica Innes was in my event, and it was a really, it was one of the events of the Olympics. But in this massive stadium, I remember putting down my blocks, and I had no idea where my family were in the crowd. And my mum was there, my brother and my brothers and their wives were there. And I put my blocks down, and I just heard my older brother's voice yell out to me, and it was just clear as bell. Wow. And so just so lovely to know, because they were so much a part of my journey as well. And I guess the third memory I have is being in the New Zealand team. It's just a great feeling. And actually excuse me, I'm usually emotional when I'm talking about this, but I've actually just got a cough at my chest. Okay. Is actually, I did 1 personal best out of 7. Sorry. And that was in javelin, and that was an event I struggled a lot with in my life. Throughout my career. So it was actually really really satisfying to pull out the goods when actually it mattered. So that was really cool.
Oh, fabulous. 3 great reflections there, the opening, and amongst 80,000 people hearing your brother call out to you, and then, you know, hitting a personal best in the javelin. So, you know, the javelin's obviously one of the heptathlon events. But just, I guess, illuminate for us, what are the 7 events in the heptathlon? And then for you, what are your strengths in that event? And then, you know, I guess the others that are your challenge. Yeah.
Sure. So it's 100-meter hurdles, high jump, shot put, 200 meters. And then day 2, you do long jump, javelin, and 800. And so my strengths were definitely the first 2 events. It was in high jump in terms of the points that I earned. And definitely high jump for me was, I'm the second best heptathlete in the scores in New Zealand's history, but I'm also the second best high jumper. So my personal best in high jump is 191. And the New Zealand record is 192, which is a shame, but also, you know, great. So the throws were definitely something which I struggled with, but in saying that, I really enjoyed the challenge of actually the process of mastery.
Yeah, well, and I just wondered, in terms of athletes who are shot put or discus specialists, do you team up with any of them to get specialist help, or does it all come through Elena, for example?
Yeah, so throughout my career, I'm sorry.
You're fine. Okay.
Winter. So throughout my career, I did work with some specialist coaches and did some work with specialist throwers, specialist jumpers, and I guess trained alongside runners who were specific to that event. So you do, you do tend to go in and out of groups at times, but Elena was the boss.
Cool. She must have been a very, you know, would have had to been very experienced across all those disciplines, and then to be the mentor and the coach for you and the team. So from the Olympics and being an athlete and now looking at women in sport, you know, you've had a long history in the sport in terms of over 15 years, been to some big events. So we'll start off with leadership. What would be some of the self-leadership or team leadership in terms of being a part of an Olympic team, lessons that you would talk about to young people that are coming through sport?
So I think to be able to lead others, you firstly need to lead yourself. So you need to, that's my own sort of feeling about leadership. And saying that, so you need to be an example and role model for what you want to see in a leader, I guess. And for me, leadership is something which has been around me. My parents have always been, I guess, community minded, and involved in like board of trustees, or, you know, friends of the school, or other groups that they were in leadership positions for me. So naturally, to be able to stand up for what is right and stand up for what I believe in is something which I've been really fortunate to have been encouraged to do so from a young age. So for me, leadership is about is about using your influence for good.
Right, and you know, in terms of that, you know, 2 things you mentioned there: standing up and using influence for good. In respect of women's sport, one of the wonderful things of speaking to the Wahine Toa is about some of the strengths that they see happening for women in sport. So it'd be good to have a chat about what your thoughts are around what are some of the really strong things we're seeing about women's sport, and then what are some of the things we probably need to see more of from your perspective.
Cool. Okay, so I think some of the really great things that we're seeing is that we have, first of all, a strategy on women and girls in sport at a government level. So we're really lucky to have a minister who has actually come out and said, actually, this is the highest priority for this portfolio for him. So I think that is just awesome as a start, because then you have to have policy to back that up.
Yeah.
Now, I think where we could go is to make that stronger policy and more investment within the sector in regards to women in sport. But I think some of the great stuff I'm seeing is that there is momentum. There is people out there who are actually just sick of, not hearing about women in sport. And actually, there's some really cool stories out there. There's some really amazing wahine toa who are doing incredible things, not just as athletes, but as administrators, as coaches, as leaders within the sector. And I think we need to keep championing those stories, because unless people can see it, then they can't be it or believe it. And so I think that the visibility piece is somewhere which needs continued work on. And it's something that we just have to keep championing, keep doing our bit. And I think we've got some great men out there who are supporting women, and we need to acknowledge that as well. And it's not a case of doing it alone, and like yourself, Andre, you're an ally. This is such an important and great Talanoa to be having today. And I think that the more people, we can't change everyone, but each of us can make a difference. And I think that when we allow young girls to have the confidence to be able to dream in a sporting sense, then that's just great. Yeah.
Oh, look, you've articulated that really well. And I think, just on this Talanoa that we've had, now if we think about, the training that you described you had to do, that's right up there with every other athlete that works hard. And that should be acknowledged, the mental skills. And I think great too, you acknowledge that the Minister of Sport is showing some leadership, and because it does need to happen at the top level and be able to influence through at national and then local and regional, right down to the local club that can offer opportunities. And and things like this, it's wonderful to be another platform that helps do that. And there are a lot of initiatives we're starting to see momentum with too, with women in sport. And there's Women in Sport Aotearoa organisation, which are providing those kinds of platforms. So wonderful to see that and to hear your reflections on it. And then, so for you now, you mentioned earlier that you're trained as a physio, but you've got 2 children. So are you kind of working between the physio, or it's just about the kids, or what? Yeah, what's life for you now?
Yeah, so I actually don't work as a physio anymore. I sort of stopped physio and retrained. I actually did a communications degree as well. So I now work mainly in communications. Sorry, this cough is really annoying. I'm sorry to everyone. But my priority is for our young family right now. So our kids, Poppy and Max. Max is 4 and Poppy is 2. Being a mum is just the greatest privilege for me, alongside my husband, Gus. But I do a number of projects, a bit like heptathlon, I guess. Can't sit still, need lots of variety. So one organisation I do work for is the Locker Room with Suzanne McFadden, and we're dedicated. It's a platform on Newsroom, and we're dedicated to profiling women in sport. So I'm actually really proud to work for Newsroom, to contribute to Locker Room, and really lucky to have that mentorship from Suze. I'm really involved in the New Zealand Olympic Committee in a number of ways, as an Olympic ambassador, as the chair of the New Zealand Olympic Committee Athletes Commission as well. And with that, I sit on the board of the NZOC. So I have a number of other governance roles, not sitting still, but enjoying opportunities that come.
Fabulous. Look, and it is lucky you did the heptathlon, so that you've got that degree of being able to be flexible and go from one thing to another. Sarah, look, just really want to thank you for your time in this Talanoa today, and for sharing your story, sharing the story about your family, growing up and your journey as an athlete, and the people that have supported you along the way, and the challenges that are there and the momentum that is happening for women in sport. So been very happy to be able to be part of talking about that with you today. So thank you very much. Whawhatai lava for your time today. Thank you once again, Sarah.